Inflation is up.
And everybody knows it.
But what do frugal people do about it? Hi, I'm Hope.
And I'm Larry.
From Under the Median. Hey, welcome to our collab video with our buddy Kate Kaden. Kate Kaden's channel is all about making frugal living fun. If you've never been over to Kate's channel, you're going to want to check it out. Now, in a collab video, Kate is talking about exactly the same topic that Larry and I are talking about. We're simultaneously releasing our videos, and I can't wait to see what Kate says about how frugal people react to inflation. And I'm going to make sure that there's a link to her video in the description of this video so you can check it out. And Larry and I have decided that we are going to call this a coffee collab in honor of the fact that Kate is always drinking out of a coffee cup on all of her videos. Plus, this gave us like a super good reason to show you our new coffee maker.
Yeah, we've got a new coffee maker. It's by Taotronics, and it's an excellent little piece. What I like about it is that it holds a lot of coffee. It makes a lot of coffee.
Yeah, it does.
And it has a self-timer on it, and you can set that to go off and have your coffee all ready for you in the morning. It's a very simple coffee maker to use. And the other thing that I like about it, when you fill it up, you can really make that a full 12 cups. You can go real full with it. So it's a nice little clean machine.
And y'all know Larry loves his good cup of coffee. So hey, thanks Taotronics for the coffee maker. If you guys want to check it out, there's a link to it in the description of the video. All right, inflation. There are 10 things that Larry and I came up with, guys, that frugal people do when we are faced with inflation. But before we talk about those 10 things,
let's talk about some stats. So the inflation rate was forecasted to be 5.8% for November, but they've actually raised it now to 6.2%. And, you know, that is a lot higher than it has been. However, you know, in our lifetime, we have seen some really high inflation rates. You know, in 1990, we had been married a couple of years, and the inflation rate was, how high was it in 1990, Hope?
it was about 9.1%. But there's actually an event in Larry's and my lifetime. If you're over 50, tell us in the comments if you remember it. And that was all the fallout from the Arab oil embargo in the mid-1970s.
It was actually 1974. I remember because I had just started driving in 1973. And that's the year that I was 16 in 1973. And that's when they lowered the speed limit to 55 miles an hour on the interstate. We were so appalled.
And then the price of gas shot up. So it was
well,
like,
you know,
it's like a double whammy.
You know, it's interesting. We were so aghast at the price of gas, but really it was about, I remember this, don't ask me why, but it was $41.9 when I started driving. And it actually ended up going, by 1976, it was about 62 cents a gallon. So even though we thought it was just going through the sky, it wasn't quite as bad as we thought it was. However, the highest rate of inflation came in 1979, and that was when it actually shot up to 13.3%. That was really high.
Now, so why are we telling you these statistics? Well, for one thing, we just want to assure you that
we've been down this road before.
And that's it. So I think if you're in your 20s or even in your 30s, maybe you're thinking, wow, this is really high inflation, and what are we going to do? Well, you know, at our age, in our mid-50s, early 60s, I think we've seen inflation of this caliber before. So that kind of brings us to
our first point.
Yeah. So the first thing that frugal people do when faced with inflation is that we don't panic.
No, we don't panic at all. You know, I remember Spock saying on Star Trek, you know, worrying about something doesn't take care of the problem, and panicking is a form of worry. That doesn't fix anything. So really, panicking and all of that stuff, it doesn't solve anything.
I think we should all use Mr. Spock as our mantra now.
Oh, he's my hero. My favorite program is Star Trek.
Oh my gosh. So we don't panic. But part of the reason we don't panic is the second thing on our list, and that is that we expect ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And part of it is because we've seen it. I'll never forget, I think we'd been married, I don't know, maybe 6-8 months. And we went over to see your parents, and his mother was incredibly intuitive. Like if we were on a date and Larry didn't get in till 2 a.m., she'd talk to him the next day and go, "So what time do you get in?" He's like, she's like she just knows these things. She's got this weird mom radar.
Radar. I was just going to say she had radar. Yeah. And she really did have eyes in the back of her head, too.
So she could really just sense when people were troubled. And we went over to their house, and she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Mom," I said, "we just saved a little money, and then something happened. We had to spend it." And she said, "Oh, honey, that's life. Life is not a straight trajectory." She said, "I wish I could tell you it was, but it's not. It is often 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But as long as you're taking steps forward more than you're taking steps backward, then really it's okay." And I'll never forget that. Wise words from a wise woman.
And it seems like we just made some adjustments in how we spent money, and we got through it. My mom and dad, they didn't make a lot of money. They got through the 1970s.
Well, they got through the Great Depression too, so you know.
so really, I mean, what they were experiencing in 1975 to 79 was nothing compared to World War II and the Depression. They got married right before World War II started. So they'd really been through some major things. This stuff to them was just a little bump in the road. And really, that's what we're experiencing right now. But most of our generation has not seen this. So this is something kind of new, and it can be a little jarring for some, you know.
The third way that frugal people react to inflation is we understand the importance of planning ahead. So frugal people by our nature are people who tend to understand that you're in this moment, but it's not like you're living in that moment. You're always thinking ahead to what is the next step I have to take. And tell me if you think we're right. So we're going to cover these 10 tips. We'd love for you to talk to us in the comment section. We feel like frugal people are just generally forward thinkers.
Yeah.
And we've already thought 2 or 3 or 4 steps down the road. So the fact that things are changing doesn't tend to jar us as much because we've already kind of seen it coming, seen the train on the track, if you will.
Yeah. So planning ahead means maybe stocking in a little extra food, maybe not spending a lot of money right now and saving a little bit in case we need it for prices that are going up a little bit. And so you just make some adjustments, and we will all get through this just fine.
One of the favorite frugal living books that I ever read was Jeff Yeager's book, The Cheapskate Next Door. Tell me if you've read that book in the comments section. If you haven't read the book, I'll leave a link to it in the description of the video because I really, really like his writing. He's just dreadfully funny the way he writes, but he's very honest, and he's got some great tips on frugality. But one of the things he said in his book, The Cheapskate Next Door, was when hard times hit, frugal people don't panic. They just put another cup of water in the soup pot.
Yeah.
So we are, and his point was, we are accustomed to making things stretch. Making things stretch is like our life. It's like, something that just really keeps us motivated and keeps us moving forward. And so, when hard times come, we are really that person that goes, well, I guess it's time to add another cup of water to the soup pot. Stretch things a little further.
Right. Our fourth point is that frugal people think outside the box. And when I'm presented with a problem, I don't focus on the problem. I focus on solutions. What can we do to fix it, go around it, do something, repair it? There's always a way to get through a problem, and there's all kinds of things that we can come up with. And thinking outside the box means you're going to use some methods maybe that you've never done before, maybe other people aren't doing. And I think this is a good time to get creative.
Frugal people are not people who really go with the mainstream. We tend to live outside the mainstream, and we're perfectly okay with that.
So true.
Being like everybody else around us is not one of our main goals.
No.
And it doesn't bother us to be considered a little bit different or to treat our problems a little bit differently and situations a little differently than the average person does or than other people generally do.
The fifth point in handling inflation for frugal people is that we're willing to change our behavior. We look for, as I mentioned, solutions, and we make adjustments where needed.
Do you remember the Red Green show?
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
remember his saying?
Duct tape.
I'm a man. I will change if I have to. And tell us, he was on PBS. Tell us if you know Red Green. I think he was Canadian. Wasn't he Canadian?
I think he was, yeah.
Okay,
He
to
was
our
famous.
Canadian viewers, woo, woo, Red Green.
He actually came to Peoria. He was live in our studio
Yeah,
one time.
so I mean, and I love
great
that
guy.
saying. It's like, I'm a man. I will change if I have to. And I think that's kind of what we're saying. If we have to change, we're going to do it. I don't think that it bothers us to look for adjustments that we can make. And you know, the other thing that's super good about this, we absolutely fully and freely admit that there is more than one way to do things.
Oh, yeah. You know, I think of the movie Jaws. When
Jaws.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Red Green seemed like a good fit. I want to see where you're going with Jaws.
Okay, so and it's not Shark Tank either.
Good.
So they're out in the boat, and the shark attacks the boat, and there's a big gaping hole, and the guy says to the fellow operating the boat, "We're going to need a bigger boat." So he wasn't worried about what the shark did. He was looking at a solution already. He already had gone right past it to the solution.
Okay, Larry gets points for his Jaws, like his nod to Jaws.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
We're going to need a bigger boat. That's what we do. Hey, before we move on to the last half of our ideas of what frugal people do when they are faced with inflation, we want to just remind you this is a coffee collab with Kate Kaden, and that means that you're going to want to watch Kate Kaden's video after you're done here to see what Kate said on exactly the same topic. There'll be a link, remember, in the description of the video.
I can't wait to see it. So we need to move this along.
No, don't say that. Silly. All right, sixth thing we do, Larry, is...
we have our finger on the pulse. Now, we're not like an ostrich with its head in the sand. I want to know what's going on. So I do pay attention to the news, although it's a little hard to find reliable news sources. But there are a lot of good channels on YouTube. One that I particularly like is City Prepper with Chris. It's an excellent channel. He's out of California. He does a lot of really heavy-hitting research. And so I watch a couple of his videos a week. And he usually has some really good ideas. He's really big into prepping and getting ready for something major. But believe me, he will be ready for it if we ever have a major problem. But it is good to know what's going on, and then you can plan from there. But plan, not panic.
You know, it's really good to know what your options are, because in our last point, we said we're willing to look at other options. But in order to do that, you got to have your finger on the pulse and you got to know what those options are. Frugal people, we think by nature, generally are lifelong learners.
Yep.
We are fascinated by finding out things that we don't already know, and find different ways to do things.
Let me give one example that I just thought of. We've heard a lot at the stores that there's some shortages. Well, what aren't they short of? Let's look at where the shelves are full, and let's look at what food is available, for instance. So if there are some shortages because of the supply chain, and if there's some prices going up because of inflation, well, maybe there's some things that aren't going up. I noticed at our Aldi's last night that there are some prices that have actually stayed the same. A lot of, for instance, their cereals have not gone up a whole lot. So look for those things instead of looking at the other things so much. Try to look for things that maybe are not adjusting as fast.
I think Larry brings up a really valid point, because I think frugal people in general tend to look for those bright spots. We tend to look for the things that are going well. So when it's like we balance things out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when things overall are not going well, we're the person that says, well, let's look at what is going well so that we can find that balance again.
Yeah. And then just work within that parameter and you'll get through this just fine.
All right. The next thing that frugal people do when faced with inflation is...
we don't give up easily.
we are willing to try something, and we don't get discouraged. We're like, well, that didn't work. And so we say, well, what's the next thing in our list that we can try? We don't give up easily. We are very willing to keep looking and looking and looking until we find a solution or find what we need at a price we can afford. And we're okay with that.
And frugality really is hard work. I mean, it takes a lot of work, a lot of discipline to live this way. So we're kind of used to it. So we just put the pedal to the metal and go with it.
Okay, number 8, guys.
We embrace community. And what do you mean by that, Hope?
Frugal people are not afraid to search out like-minded people, and we're not afraid to exchange ideas, and we're not afraid to exchange and barter for what we need. We're not afraid to say, hey, you know how to do this and I don't. What do I know how to do that you need? And let's barter, let's trade. We are very accustomed to surrounding ourselves with that community of like-minded people, and that is so healthy and so helpful when a situation like inflation occurs.
Yeah. Maybe trade some abilities you have for some abilities that you don't have with somebody else. That's a great way to get through it.
All right.
We also practice thankfulness. We're thankful for what we have. And if you have an attitude of thankfulness, you'll get through things a lot easier.
And finally, number 10.
We embrace delayed gratification. In other words, we can put off some things, wait for a better time to do something. We don't have to have everything right now. So that means you have to exercise a little bit of patience. And that's hard to do. I know there's things that I would like to have sooner than I can have them. But with delayed gratification, you're going to get things maybe at a lesser price than you'd have to pay right now while prices are going up.
We're also accustomed to figuring out what's most important and what should be prioritized. There's my word, guys. Prioritize. My favorite word. We're used to prioritizing our needs and our needs versus our wants.
That's important.
And so I think we're very accustomed to saying, okay, this is a need right now, but this maybe isn't a need right now, and just setting things aside until we can get them in time. And that doesn't tend to bother us. The other thing we're super duper good at is accepting that sometimes substitutions must be made. Flexibility must occur.
And it might mean that you maybe don't spend money on entertainment and some things that you had planned to do. Let those go till later, because you need the resources for the things that you need right now.
All right, those are the 10 things that we think that frugal people do when they are faced with inflation. I think we actually did like a few more than 10. We had like some really great subpoints in there. So we are so excited to find out what Kate Kaden said over at her channel about this exact same topic. Remember, today was a coffee collab. Be sure you check out Kate Kaden's video over on her channel about the same topic. We'll leave a link in the video description.
We'll see you, Kate.